Welcome back to another disturbing episode of Crime Scene X. Today's video will cover 3 disturbing and true horror stories that take place on the beach. If you enjoy the video, leave a like, comment down below, and subscribe for daily scary stories. Sit back and enjoy the video. The sun was setting, its final rays shimmering across the ocean's surface. I had spent the day at the beach, trying to get away from the stress of work and personal issues. A day of sun and surf seemed like the ideal reset button. The beach had gradually emptied out, and now I was the only one left, savoring the quiet and solitude. I had even left my phone in the car to avoid distractions. As darkness set in, I gathered my things and started walking toward the parking lot, which was a good 10-minute trek from where I had set up my spot. The lot was far enough away that it was swallowed by the evening fog, lights barely visible in the distance. My flip-flops made soft slapping sounds against the wet sand as I walked. That's when I saw him, a lone figure standing near the water's edge, staring out at the ocean. Something about him struck me as out of place, though I couldn't put my finger on it. Was it his attire? A thick, heavy coat seemed inappropriate for the beach, especially on a warm evening. Maybe it was the way he was standing, stiff and unmoving like a statue. As I approached, he turned his head and looked directly at me. I felt a jolt of unease. There was an intensity in his gaze that made me uncomfortable. I quickened my pace, telling myself I was overreacting. Maybe he was just lost in thought or dealing with his own personal demons. As I passed him, trying not to make eye contact again, I heard footsteps behind me. I stole a quick glance over my shoulder and saw that he was following me. My heart rate picked up, and the sensation of unease morphed into real fear. What if he was dangerous? What if he meant to harm me? I weighed my options. Running might provoke him, but ignoring the situation didn't seem wise either. I decided on a middle ground. I would walk faster, not obviously enough to alarm him, but enough to widen the gap between us. Despite my efforts, his footsteps seemed to get louder, closer. I realized I had underestimated how far away the parking lot really was. It still seemed an eternity away. My flip-flops weren't doing me any favors, they were slowing me down. Finally, in a burst of adrenaline, I decided to run. As I broke into a sprint, so did he. My fears were confirmed. He was definitely chasing me. My mind raced as fast as my heart. I was alone without a phone, on a beach, being chased by a stranger. I thought about screaming, but who would hear me? I thought about heading into the ocean. But then what? He could easily catch up. My best chance was to make it to the parking lot, to my car, where I could lock myself in and drive away. The sand seemed to turn into quicksand, each step an effort. My lungs were on fire, but fear was a powerful motivator. Finally, the parking lot was in sight. I could see my car, parked under a flickering streetlight. I fumbled in my bag for my car keys, my fingers trembling but my eyes fixed on my car. I reached the car, unlocked it, and practically threw myself inside, locking the doors immediately. My heart was pounding in my ears as I started the engine and sped out of the parking lot. I didn't stop until I was miles away, finally pulling over to catch my breath. I never saw the man again. I reported the incident to the police, but without a good description or any sort of evidence, there wasn't much they could do. To this day, I don't know who he was or what he wanted. The alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., jolting me out of a restless sleep. The forecast had promised perfect waves, and as a dedicated surfer, there was no way I was going to miss out. By 5 a.m., I was on the beach, the first light of dawn barely illuminating the horizon. The air was thick with fog, reducing visibility to just a few yards. A perfect setting for horror movies, I thought, but shook off the notion immediately. Waxing my board, I noticed 3 other silhouettes in the mist. Fellow early birds intent on catching the best waves before the rest of the world woke up. We exchanged nods and casual greetings before wading into the surf, the icy water instantly jolting us awake. Out on the water, the fog was even thicker, each of us appearing and disappearing like phantoms in the mist. I paddled out further, finally catching a wave and riding it with the pure exhilaration that only surfers know. But as I was about to paddle back out, I heard it. A loud splash, followed by an eerie silence. I looked around, straining my eyes through the fog. One silhouette was missing. "Hey, you guys okay?" I shouted. "Yeah, man, what was that splash?" one of them responded. "I have no idea," said the other. My stomach churned. In these early morning hours, we weren't the only creatures in the ocean. And in these foggy conditions, the chances of a shark mistaking a surfer for a seal were exponentially higher. I felt my heart race, every instinct screaming at me to get back to shore. "We should head back in," I yelled. "Agreed," they shouted back. But just as I began to paddle, I saw it, a dark, looming shape in the water, circling beneath one of the remaining surfers. "Shark!" I screamed, paddling furiously towards him to warn him. He heard me and began to paddle in, but the shark was faster. With a swift movement, it lunged but missed, its fin momentarily breaking through the fog before it disappeared into the deep. We were in a race against a predator, blinded by the fog and driven by pure adrenaline. With pounding hearts, we paddled as if our lives depended on it, because they did. I heard another splash behind me, this time accompanied by a scream from one of my fellow surfers. He'd been knocked off his board but had managed to scramble back on. We were close to the shore now, the waves helping to propel us forward, but so was the shark. With one final push, we rode a wave into the shallows, stumbling onto the beach with shaking legs and gasping breaths. As we dragged ourselves onto the sand, authorities arrived, alerted by some early morning joggers who had heard our screams. The beach was closed for the day, and a search commenced for the missing surfer. Hours later, they found his board, marred with bite marks, but he was never found. It was a sobering reminder of the ocean's dangers, lurking beneath its beautiful facade. And though I returned to the waves weeks later, something had changed. Each splash in the distance, each shape in the water, now carried a weight of unease that no amount of early morning surf could wash away. The beach has always been my sanctuary, a place where the troubles of the world seem to dissolve into the waves. That's why, after a particularly grueling week at work, I found myself driving to the coast. I parked my car near the entrance and began the familiar trek over the dunes toward the shoreline. The sun was low on the horizon, casting long shadows across the sand. I noticed someone in the distance, flying a kite near the surf. Something about the scene felt off, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I shrugged it off and headed for my usual spot, nestling between two large sand dunes that offered a degree of seclusion. I lay down my towel, kicked off my shoes, and sprawled out, allowing the sun's dying rays to caress my face. Just as I began to doze off, I heard a soft rustling noise coming from the other side of the dune. Probably just a seagull or a stray dog, I thought. Yet the sound persisted, growing louder and closer. Curiosity getting the better of me, I sat up and peered over the dune. To my surprise, I saw a man hurriedly digging in the sand. It was the same man I had seen flying the kite earlier. He looked frantic, almost desperate. Our eyes met, and he froze. "Beautiful evening, isn't it?" I said, trying to sound casual, attempting to mask the unease building within me. He stared at me for a moment, clearly weighing his options. "Yes," he finally said. "It's a perfect evening." He resumed his digging, now with a newfound urgency. That's when I noticed the kite laying on the ground nearby, and something bundled in a tarp beside it. It wasn't a large bundle, but it was unmistakably the shape of a human body. My stomach turned and my brain screamed at me to run. I didn't look back as I sprinted across the sand, my feet digging into the soft surface, making it difficult to move quickly. I felt horribly exposed, painfully aware of how isolated I was. When I finally reached my car, I fumbled with my keys, my hands trembling uncontrollably. I locked the doors immediately after getting in and sped away. As soon as I had cell reception, I called the police. I led them back to where I had witnessed the man digging. They found the spot, but it was empty, only disturbed sand marking it. They launched an investigation but couldn't find any immediate evidence. They took my statement and contact details, promising to get in touch if they found anything. Weeks passed, and the incident began to feel like a terrible dream. That was until the police called to inform me that they had discovered a body buried on the beach, not far from where I had seen the man digging. They couldn't disclose any details, but they thanked me for my report. I still think about that evening, about what would have happened if I had stayed, or if I had arrived at the beach just a little later. It's a thought that haunts me. Thanks for watching. If you haven't already, please like the video, comment what you thought, and subscribe for daily uploads.